So can you see that one?
Yeah.
So I was always fascinated with Smalltalk, especially in the thing that anything is an object, even a class. So I guess this really distinguishes us from most of the mainstream languages, software, whatever, because it's fully object-oriented. In fact, Smalltalk is not a language. In fact, Smalltalk is a object-oriented system where the language is just built in with methods and message sending, as we know. And if you look at the structure, what we have classes, and we have, for instance, a class has a superclass or might have a superclass if it's not the topmost, or it can have subclasses, 0 to many. So you can create new subclasses in the system. And if you check for what Smalltalk uses this for, this is normally for tooling. So we have a browser, we can go into the browser, we can see the subclasses, we can browse our hierarchy. And what struck me is, okay, is it really that anything is an object? Really? Because if you go and dig deeper, then some things in a Smalltalk system, at least in the traditional Smalltalk 80 systems, are not objects. So for instance, if you take a class category, and this is just a plain string. So some Smalltalks have extended this and made an object out of that. They made a package. And you can ask this as an object and have a class called package for it. Or if there is an instance variable, then normally this is just a plain string. But for instance, in Faro, you can have slots where you can say, okay, you can have a class and a real object for that, and you can have attributes on that object and other and state on that object as well. So when you compare it, let's say, to a traditional Smalltalk system, what you normally don't have is you do not have things like this relation. You can say, okay, there's a superclass, but you cannot say how many. Is this a collection returning, or is this just a simple object returning? So if you ask for subclasses, then you get a collection. If you ask for the superclass, you get a single one. So we lose the information about the cardinality. We do not know how many. So a lot of things in our Smalltalk systems are on the meta level. So, and some Smalltalks have, let's say, extended this meta level. And for me, I think this is really, I do this now since several years in experimenting with that stuff. What if you could extend that meta level very easily and say, okay, I have anything as an object, for instance, a package, not only the class and method, but for instance, the slots as Faro now provides, or as we spoke today also about, okay, what is a change? What is a version? If there is really an object and I can ask for the version of the package, then this would be much better than just, okay, having a tag that says, okay, string here, this is the version. Maybe I can ask the version, what is the change to the previous version? So even a version, if you remember envy and other things, if this is an object, you could query it, you could ask it, you could handle it, you could persist it and other things. Or we also spoke today about, for instance, what Christian said, that he has porting stuff from Visualworks, which has namespaces, to some open source Smalltalks like Squeak, which out of the box does not have namespace. There are namespace implementations for it, but out of the box, usually they don't have them. But even in other languages, you have packages and namespaces that you could ask for. Or types. We know that we are runtime typed compared to other languages which lose this information. So often people say, yeah, Smalltalk is not a typed language compared to C or Java or other, where you definitely declare the type. But the different thing is that in C or C++ and wherever, you declare the type mostly just to satisfy the compiler and find initial things there. But in Smalltalk, you never lose the type. If you compile in C or C++, then you lose the information if it's a double or an int, because this is just for the compilation process. But at runtime, you cannot ask a variable anymore. In Smalltalk, you are runtime typed. You can always ask for the types. And the cardinalities, this is something you do not normally have, neither in a Smalltalk system. And there is a nice notation that came up in the 90s. It was very famous, UML. I do see today only a few people using really UML. Most of them just generate that code after that, file-based code from UML. But the idea is, okay, what if you use UML to have a more lively thing, and even for business applications? Mostly if you have a software that you use today, like for instance, a software that you use to manage your investments or stocks or whatever, then this software is not extensible. Why? Because you need a programmer for that. But if you say, okay, here I have my stocks and I need a description on that, or on my whatever business application, I would like to just extend it lively while it's running. So for instance, for a simple thing like you have a task management with a begin, end, priority, you would like to go into a live application and say while it's running, yeah, I know my model in the running application, and I have, for instance, a task, and the system knows, okay, a task has a begin, and it does not has lost this information that the begin is, for instance, a date. So while the application is running, I can directly and interactively, sorry, that crashed now. No, that's here. I can directly, let's say, add that field again and change it. And anytime I change it, we have the MVC product, MVC pattern. For instance, it can change on any place where it happens. So I can even reconfigure an application while it's running, just because it keeps that meta information. And this is, for me, something that I try to explore. But in Smalltalk, I also have some limits on that. Because what I've initially did is, for instance, I used UML. And I brought the UML stuff that I modeled visually, because visually is very easy to do. I brought that in, for instance, into Faro or in my Smalltalk system. So for instance, if I have a task and it inherits, for instance, from a named object, the task has a name, and I keep that meta information. Okay, I have slots like there is this begin and it knows that it is a date. Or for instance, if I have a priority, it knows that it is an integer. Or if I have the subtasks or supertask, then I know this has subtasks, and I know about this cardinality. I know that there is a multiplicity of 0 to many. So if I do this in Smalltalk, I can extend my Smalltalk system quite well, but the underlying system, the Smalltalk itself, is not working that way. So I cannot ask superclass about the cardinality. So ideally, I built a Smalltalk system right from the ground up with all that meta information, so that you could just know that on class that there is an instance variable, subclasses possibly, and that tells you, okay, I have 0 to many subclasses. And so I thought, okay, in Smalltalk you have limits, especially when you go to the, let's say, the kernel of the core parts of Smalltalk itself. If you try to extend object and other things, then you might hit boundaries like the VM requires a certain layout, and then you might face crashes. So I thought, okay, why not use or check something that also has objects? And there is a language that we now have access to in any normal web browser. This is JavaScript. And JavaScript at the primary level, it might be a bad let's say, language from some certain, let's say, things like comparisons and other, but basically it's objects. So you could connect objects to another. And what is Smalltalk internally? It's one object points to the next object. So I thought, okay, we have prototypes in JavaScript and other. So you only have to, I thought, okay, what if I, let's say, try to mock the same thing as a Smalltalk system in a JavaScript system? And that I just connect the correct objects to another, so that I can have a class and ask the class for its class and have the meta class and so on. So, you know, in Smalltalk, we have more than just the class. We can ask, because it's an object, we can ask for its class itself. So I thought, okay, what would it cost me to do that? And model a package, have an object, and an object also having an object class, and so on, and mimicking this in JavaScript. And so I used Visual Studio and wrote a little bit of Bootstrap code to bootstrap a kind of Smalltalk-like system where, so this is basically a declaration of a minimal Smalltalk image. Okay, you have model, object, you have member, you have behavior, class description, so all the things you know. And I even added traits, because traits means sideways inheritance and other things that we have in Faro. And I thought, okay, how much code is required to actually do that? So you see here at the side, this is not much code that was required to do that. And in the end, I came then into into JavaScript, and then here in JavaScript, I call this OJO object-oriented Java, whatever, Java objects. So here I call it OJO.language, and then I can ask, for instance, okay, package. And this is a class package. And I can make var a is new language dot package. And then if I ask a, then it tells me, okay, I'm in package. I have a name. I can set the name. R.name is my package. So if I ask, I have a primitive inspector here in the browser. So I see the name. But the thing is also that I can ask now, okay, please tell me your class. And A tells me, okay, my class is package. So I can even ask, please give me the class of the class. Oh, sorry. And it tells me this is package class. And I can continue doing that then. And then I have a kind of meta class. And at the moment I experiment in, okay, how far can I go that I even have the cardinalities, the objects and other things, and just model them graphically and just re-bootstrap a kind of data model, and possibly even also this reconfigurable UI, because a lot of things you get for free when you keep the meta informations. For instance, a persistence framework, if it knows that there's a relationship 0 to many, it knows, okay, I can map that to tables or whatever, or documents in a NoSQL database and other. So at the moment, this is mostly experimenting. I don't know where this ends up, but it's interesting. And ideally, let's say, I know that for sure I will also hit boundaries on JavaScript side, and at least from the syntax, if you write methods or other, when it comes down to code, JavaScript is not nice. So ideally, let's say this ends up in a bootstrappable Smalltalk system that really has already an extended meta layer that is fully reconfigurable on the fly. This would be, let's say, the ideal result of these experiments. But for this, I guess I require more work or a bootstrappable system like Pigeon, Smalltalk, or other, that could be really from the VM side be very, let's say, reflective and extensible. Okay, that's all.
Any questions?
Have you talked to Marcus on the Faro team about what you're doing there? I know he was interested in this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Faro contributor since the first thing. I worked with Squeak initially on Windows when Andreas Raab worked on that. I was helping forking from Squeak away to Faro. So I work closely with Marcus all the time in fixing bugs and other in Faro since the beginning. And we exchange also on ASUG on things like slots and what things could be extended. But the thing is also on the Faro side, we have certain things, but let's say it's not so easy, for instance, to introduce namespaces now right away, because Faro makes steady progress step by step. A lot of people also have to move from one to the other. So from the innovation side, it also slowed down a little bit. But in general, as a Smalltalk system, it's, let's say, it's the one that innovates most at the moment. So we have discussed these. Also, we have now new possibilities that we discussed. We have now, there is now even an environment. So basically in Faro, you can even ask a class for its environment, and you can have a second environment inside of your image. So what about a Smalltalk system that you could use and create another environment in the same image with another object class?
So you could do these sorts of experiments. Yeah.
This would be really so. The thing is that at the moment we are stuck a little bit in our Smalltalk world to that Smalltalk 80 model. But this Smalltalk 80 model also has started to develop from, okay, we have a simple procedure down to, okay, we have classes, we now want to be object oriented. And the only thing you have to do is you keep that turtles all the way down approach, and you just throw out the strings. So you want to have for a class category, you want to have a real object. For instance, what is now possible in Faro is you can now ask even for a variable. So in Faro 9 and 10, you have a variable as a class, and you can ask temporary variables. So you can ask the temporary variables in a method if they are still used in the syntax tree or not, and in the method. So we were easily able to clean up Faro now with this approach from Markus, because I do a lot of boring cleaning in Faro over time also. But we were able, for instance, to clean up the old Squid code in methods where we had lots of temporary variables that were not used. So if this is an object, and you could ask the temporary variable if it is referenced or not, that's the thing. So you have to have always objects. That's the key.
Just picking up on something you said about having an image with multiple versions of the same sort of named class in it. Whenever I've thought of that, I've run up against the question of literals. You know, how do I want to express which small int class to create when I write 3, or which string class to create? And I don't know if you've already thought of that or have a solution you like or not.
Yeah, I thought about that deeply already, because this is not so easy to answer. Because think of the following: I've once heard about a Visual Works image or project in France where they translated the Visual Works image. So the first time I heard about this story, I was surprised. Okay, why would you do that? But there were people that thought, okay, it would be a good idea to have array not in English, but maybe in the French naming. So if you really think about that, then at the moment we use literals, but literals are not translatable. So we use strings for that. But internally, the only thing you need to have is an object with an attribute that never changes, like an GUID, for instance. So if you compare that to, for instance, COM approach from Microsoft, or things that you had in Corba and other layers, then you often depict things with global unique identifiers. But they are costly, they are long strings. But this is a non-changeable thing, and you can never generate another one on another computer. And the name is just something, okay, if you rename the method, it's if you rename a class, it's just the same class.
So I can't tell whether you're answering the question I tried to ask or not, but we're out of time. So we'll have to discuss this another time, but thanks for your patience with me.
Right.